In March 2020, the stock market crashed 34% in 23 days. The fastest crash in history. Millions of Americans panicked. They sold stocks at the bottom. They cashed out 401ks. They went to cash because they were terrified. In those same 23 days, the wealthiest Americans did the opposite. They bought. Jeff Bezos bought. Elon Musk bought. Warren Buffett sat on $130 billion in cash, waiting for exactly this moment. By December 2020, 9 months later, the market had fully recovered and hit new highs. The Americans who panic sold had locked in 34% losses. The billionaires who bought at the bottom had gained 70%. In those 9 months, American billionaires increased their wealth by $1.3 trillion. 8 million Americans fell into poverty. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't unfortunate timing. This was the wealth extraction cycle working exactly as designed. Because here's what nobody tells you. Crashes don't destroy wealth. They transfer it. The money doesn't disappear. It moves. From people who sell in panic to people who buy in panic. From people who need cash to people who have cash. From the many to the few. And this pattern has repeated every 10 to 15 years for 120 years. Same mechanism, same beneficiaries, same victims. The boom inflates asset prices. Ordinary people buy high because they're told it's safe. The crash collapses prices. Ordinary people sell low because they're terrified. The recovery rewards those who bought the crash. Wealth transfers upward. Then it repeats. 1907, 1929, 1987, 2000, 2008, 2020, 6 major crashes, 6 massive wealth transfers. The rich get richer after every single one. And here's what should make you furious. The people who benefit from crashes are often the same people who create them. The same institutions that inflate bubbles profit when they pop. The same banks that make reckless loans get bailed out while you lose your house. The system isn't broken. It's functioning perfectly. The crashes aren't accidents. They're harvests. Let me show you how this cycle works, how it's operated for 120 years, and why you're the crop being harvested. Every wealth extraction cycle begins the same way. Cheap money. The Federal Reserve lowers interest rates. Credit becomes easy. Borrowing becomes cheap. Money floods into the economy. When borrowing is cheap, people borrow. Businesses borrow to expand. Consumers borrow to spend. Investors borrow to speculate. Demand increases for everything. Asset prices rise. Stocks go up because companies have access to cheap capital. Real estate goes up because mortgages are cheap. Everything inflates. And here's the mechanism that creates the bubble. Rising prices create more buying. When stocks rise 20%, people feel wealthy. They buy more stocks. Their buying pushes prices higher. Higher prices attract more buyers. A self-reinforcing cycle upward. The same happens with real estate. Home prices rise. People rush to buy before prices go higher. Their buying pushes prices higher. Fear of missing out creates more fear of missing out. Media amplifies the cycle. Headlines celebrate the boom. Dow hits new record. Home prices surge. This time, it's different. Experts explain why prices will keep rising forever. And ordinary people buy at the top because they've been told it's safe, because everyone else is buying, because missing out feels worse than overpaying. In 1928, stock prices had doubled in 2 years. Taxi drivers gave stock tips. Shoe shine boys discussed portfolios. Everyone was in the market. In 2006, home prices had doubled in 5 years. Waiters owned 3 rental properties. House flipping shows dominated TV. Everyone was a real estate investor. In 2021, stock prices had doubled in 2 years. Reddit forums created millionaires. Meme stocks made teenagers rich. Everyone was a day trader. The pattern is identical. Cheap money creates boom. Boom creates euphoria. Euphoria brings in ordinary people at the top. Right before the crash. But here's what ordinary people don't see. The insiders are selling. In 1929, Joe Kennedy famously sold all his stocks before the crash. He said when his shoeshine boy started giving stock tips, he knew the market was too popular. In 2006, hedge fund managers like John Paulson were betting against subprime mortgages. Goldman Sachs was selling mortgage products to clients while secretly shorting them. In 2021, corporate insiders sold $69 billion in stock, the highest level in history. They were selling to you. The boom is stage one of the extraction. Inflate prices with cheap money, draw in ordinary people at the top, let insiders exit. Then comes the crash. Every bubble pops, the trigger varies. But the mechanism is always the same. Credit tightens. The Federal Reserve raises rates. Borrowing becomes expensive. The cheap money that inflated the bubble withdraws. Prices stop rising. When prices stop rising, the speculators who bought for appreciation panic. They need prices to rise to profit. Flat prices mean they're losing money on interest payments. They sell. Their selling pushes prices down. Falling prices trigger more selling. The self-reinforcing cycle reverses. Now it's self-reinforcing downward. And here's the mechanism that destroys ordinary people. Leverage. Ordinary people don't buy assets with cash. They borrow. They take mortgages for houses. They use margin for stocks. They're leveraged. Leverage amplifies gains on the way up, but it destroys on the way down. If you put $50,000 down on a $250,000 house with a $200,000 mortgage, you're leveraged 5 to 1. If the house rises 20% to $300,000, your equity doubles to $100,000. You made 100% on a 20% rise. Leverage is magic. But if the house falls 20% to $200,000, your equity goes to zero. You lost 100% on a 20% decline. You're underwater. You owe more than the house is worth. In 2008, 10 million American families went underwater on their mortgages. Their 20% down payments vanished. Their wealth was extracted in months, and they couldn't hold on, because leverage comes with payments. When you're leveraged, you have to make monthly payments, mortgage payments, margin interest. If you can't make payments, you're forced to sell. Even at the worst prices, the wealthy don't have this problem. They buy with cash, no payments, no forced selling. They can wait. When the crash comes, ordinary people are forced to sell. Margin calls, foreclosures, bankruptcy. They sell at the bottom because they have no choice. The wealthy aren't forced to sell. They have cash. They have no margin calls. They can hold. Or better, they can buy. This is the mechanism of the crash. Falling prices force leveraged sellers to sell. Their forced selling crashes prices further. The wealth doesn't disappear. It transfers from those who must sell to those who can buy. In 1929, margin calls forced massive stock selling. Prices fell 89% over 3 years. Ordinary investors were wiped out. But the cash went somewhere. In 2008, foreclosures flooded the market with cheap houses. Prices fell 40%. Middle-class homeowners lost everything. But someone bought those houses. In 2020, the flash crash triggered stop losses and panic selling. Prices fell 34% in 3 weeks. Retail investors crystallized losses. But institutional investors were buying. The crash is stage 2 of the extraction, collapse prices. Force leverage sellers to sell at the bottom, prepare the transfer. Now comes stage 3, the actual transfer, buying the wreckage. The crash creates opportunity, but only for those with cash. When prices collapse 40–50%, assets become cheap. Houses that cost $300,000 sell for $180,000. Stocks that traded at $100 sell for $40. Quality assets at distressed prices. But ordinary people can't buy. They just lost their jobs. Their savings are depleted. Their credit is destroyed. They're trying to survive, not invest. The wealthy can buy. They have cash. They have credit lines. They have access to capital that ordinary people don't, and here's the mechanism that guarantees the transfer. The wealthy buy from the very institutions that crash the market. In 2008, banks held millions of foreclosed homes. They needed to sell. But selling millions of homes one by one takes years. Prices would stay depressed, so the government helped. Obama's administration created bulk sale programs. Banks could sell thousands of homes at once to institutional investors at discounts of 40–60% below pre-crash values. BlackRock, Blackstone, and private equity firms bought 300,000 homes in 3 years. They paid $100,000 for houses worth $250,000 before the crash, houses that would be worth $400,000 in 2024. They bought from banks that were bailed out with taxpayer money, banks that caused the crash through reckless lending. The mechanism is stunning. Banks made bad loans, crashed the economy, got bailed out by taxpayers, then sold the foreclosed homes to Wall Street at discount prices. Ordinary people lost their homes. Taxpayers paid for the bailout. Wall Street bought the homes cheap. 3 wealth transfers in one crash. And it happened again in 2020. When COVID crashed markets, the Federal Reserve stepped in. They printed $4 trillion. They bought bonds, mortgage securities, even corporate debt. They flooded markets with cash. But the cash didn't go to ordinary people. It went to financial institutions, who used it to buy crashed assets. From March 2020 to March 2021, while unemployment was 10% and millions faced eviction, private equity firms bought single-family homes at record pace. They used Fed-provided liquidity to scoop up houses from families who couldn't make mortgage payments. The Fed printed money to save the economy. The money went to Wall Street. Wall Street used it to buy assets from distressed Americans. Another transfer. Here are the numbers. In 2007, the top 1% owned 35% of American wealth. In 2010, after the crash and recovery, they owned 40%. In 2019, the top 1% owned 38% of American wealth. In 2021, after the COVID crash and recovery, they owned 42%. Every crash increases wealth concentration. Because the crash is the transfer mechanism, the wealthy buy the wreckage that ordinary people are forced to sell. Now comes stage 4, the reset for the next extraction. After the transfer comes the recovery. The Fed lowers rates again, credit becomes cheap again, prices rise again. The assets that Wall Street bought at 40% discounts appreciate. The houses BlackRock bought for $100,000 are worth $400,000. The stocks billionaires bought at the bottom have tripled. Meanwhile, ordinary people rebuild from zero. They lost their homes, their savings, their retirement accounts. They start over with nothing, while the wealthy compound gains on assets bought during the crash. And here's the mechanism that guarantees repetition. The lessons are never learned. After 1929, regulations were passed. Glass-Steagall separated commercial and investment banking. SEC regulated markets. It worked for 50 years. Then regulations were repealed. Glass-Steagall ended in 1999. Banking restrictions loosened. The 2008 crash followed 9 years later. After 2008, Dodd-Frank passed. Banks faced stress tests. Capital requirements increased. It was supposed to prevent future crashes. Then regulations were loosened. Bank lobby won exemptions. Stress tests were weakened. The 2023 bank failures followed. The cycle demands repetition. Because too much wealth concentrates at the top after each crash. The wealthy need new victims, new bubbles, new crashes, new transfers. So cheap money flows again. A new bubble inflates. New ordinary people buy at the top. And in 10–15 years, another crash harvests their wealth. 1907 to 1929, 22 years, 1929 to 1987, 58 years because the Depression and World War II delayed the cycle, 1987 to 2000, 13 years, 2000 to 2008, 8 years, 2008 to 2020, 12 years, 2020 to now, 5 years, and counting. The cycles are accelerating. More frequent crashes mean more frequent transfers. The machine is speeding up. This isn't conspiracy. The names are public. The mechanisms are documented. J.P. Morgan engineered the 1907 panic. His banks called in loans, creating a cash shortage. Smaller banks failed. Morgan then rescued the system by providing liquidity at terms favorable to his interests. The crisis he helped create led to the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, giving private bankers control over money creation. In 1929, insiders sold before the crash. Joe Kennedy, Bernard Baruch, the Rockefellers. They had information ordinary people didn't. They exited at the top and bought at the bottom. The Rockefellers emerged from the Depression wealthier than before. In 2008, Goldman Sachs sold mortgage products to clients while betting against those same products. They made $4 billion while their clients lost billions. They were bailed out with $10 billion in taxpayer money. No executives went to prison. In 2020, senators sold stocks after classified COVID briefings weeks before the public knew the danger. They avoided losses while their constituents were crushed. The pattern is consistent. Insiders have information first. They exit before crashes. They buy during crashes. They profit from the cycle. And the Federal Reserve enables it every time. When markets crash, the Fed prints money. That money goes to banks and financial institutions who use it to buy cheap assets. The Fed has never printed money and sent it directly to ordinary people. The 2020 stimulus sent $200 checks to Americans. The Fed sent $4 trillion to Wall Street. The ratio tells you who the system serves. The wealth extraction cycle works because ordinary people are programmed to make the wrong decisions. Buy high. Media, financial advisors, and social pressure all push you to buy when prices are high. The market always goes up long term. You're missing out. This time it's different. You buy at the top because everyone tells you it's safe. Sell low. When crashes come, fear overwhelms reason. Media screams panic. Headlines warn of worse to come. Your portfolio is down 40%. You sell because you can't take the pain. You lock in losses at the bottom. Stay out of the recovery. After selling at the bottom, you're traumatized. You distrust markets. You stay in cash while prices recover. You miss the gains that would have restored your wealth. Buy high again. Eventually, prices reach new highs. Media celebrates. Fear of missing out returns. You buy again. At the top, the cycle repeats. This isn't weakness. It's human psychology. Our brains aren't designed for investing. We feel losses twice as intensely as gains. We panic in crowds. We extrapolate recent trends into the future. The wealthy understand this. They exploit it. When ordinary people panic sell, the wealthy buy. When ordinary people pile in at the top, the wealthy sell. They're not smarter. They're positioned to exploit predictable human behavior, and they have structural advantages. Information. Wealthy investors have access to information ordinary people don't. Private briefings, insider networks, early data, liquidity. Wealthy investors have cash when others don't. No forced selling, ability to buy at the bottom, leverage on better terms. Wealthy investors can borrow at lower rates, more access to credit, patience. Wealthy investors can wait decades, no monthly payments forcing decisions. Time is on their side. You're not playing the same game. You're the mark in a casino, convinced you're a player. The final piece of the machine is the bailout. When crashes threaten to destroy wealthy institutions, the government intervenes. Taxpayer money saves banks. Printed money saves markets. The losses are socialized while the previous gains remain private. In 2008, banks lost trillions on bad mortgages, but they weren't allowed to fail. TARP gave them $700 billion. The Fed gave them trillions more in secret loans. AIG was saved with $182 billion because Goldman Sachs would lose if AIG failed. The executives who crashed the system kept their bonuses. The banks that made reckless bets were made whole. The shareholders took some losses, but bondholders were protected. Meanwhile, 10 million families lost their homes. No bailout for them. They were foreclosed on by the very banks that taxpayers saved. Here's the mechanism. When you make a bad bet and lose, you lose. When banks make a bad bet and lose, you pay. This is privatized gains, socialized losses. The fundamental principle of American finance. During booms, financial institutions keep all profits, executives earn billions, shareholders get dividends, no sharing with taxpayers. During crashes, financial institutions are saved by taxpayers. Losses are absorbed by the public. The institutions survive to profit again. In 2020, the same pattern repeated. The Fed printed $4 trillion to save markets. Airlines got $54 billion. Banks got unlimited liquidity. Asset prices recovered. But the $4 trillion didn't come from nowhere. It was printed money that diluted your savings. Inflation followed. Your $100,000 in savings lost 20% purchasing power. The bailout was paid through invisible taxation. The wealthy gained $1.3 trillion in 2020. Your groceries cost 25% more in 2023. The transfer is complete. Let's look at wealth distribution across the cycles. 1929. Top 1% wealth share before crash, 40%. Top 1% wealth share after crash, 45%. Transfer, 5% of total wealth moved upward. 2008. Top 1% wealth share before crash, 35%. Top 1% wealth share after crash, 40%. Transfer, 5% of total wealth moved upward. 2020. Top 1% wealth share before crash, 38%. Top 1% wealth share after crash, 42%. Transfer, 4% of total wealth moved upward. Every crash transfers 4 to 5% of total American wealth from the bottom 99% to the top 1%. Total American household wealth is $150 trillion. A 5% transfer is $7.5 trillion per crash. Moving from ordinary people to the wealthy. The next crash will transfer another $7 to $8 trillion. The crash after that, another $7 to $8 trillion. The pattern only goes one direction. Wealth concentrates. Every cycle, every crash, every bailout, you're not investing, you're being harvested. The wealth extraction cycle is a machine designed over 120 years. Boom, crash, transfer, repeat. The wealthy get richer after every crash because the system is built for exactly that outcome. Cheap money inflates bubbles that draw in ordinary people at the top. Crashes collapse prices and force leveraged sellers to sell at the bottom. The wealthy buy the wreckage with cash. Bailouts protect institutions while ordinary people get nothing. Recovery rewards those who bought the crash. Then it repeats. 1907, 1929, 1987, 2000, 2008, 2020. The same pattern, the same winners, the same losers. And here's the final truth. Knowing the pattern doesn't necessarily help you escape it, because the system is designed to make you do the wrong thing at the wrong time. Media, psychology, social pressure, leverage, all pushing you to buy high and sell low. The only escape is refusing to play, refusing to buy at the top, refusing to sell at the bottom, having cash when others don't. Buying when there's blood in the streets. But that requires doing the opposite of what feels natural. The opposite of what everyone tells you. The opposite of what the system programs you to do. If this changed how you see market cycles, if you finally understand why you get poorer after every crash while billionaires get richer, then you're starting to see the machine. Subscribe if you want to understand how to position yourself before the next extraction, because the next boom is already inflating, the next crash is already scheduled, the next transfer is already planned. And if you don't understand the cycle, you're the crop being harvested. Boom, crash, transfer, repeat.